Fan Fiction Friday is back, and this is going to be very unhinged. But let's do it. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is Friday, November 18th, 2022. This is Ty Gonzalez and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you want to hear from us even more, please consider signing up for our Patreon. The link, as well as our social accounts, is in the description below. It is Fan Fiction Friday. The return, folks. It is back. Some of you already know what that means, but I assume probably a lot of you don't, because we've added quite a few subscribers, listeners, all that good stuff over the last year since the last time we did a Fan Fiction Friday. So Colby, tell the folks what we're doing today and what we're going to be doing on future Friday episodes.
Yeah, so basically, Fan Fiction Friday is your guys' chance to send your terrible trade offers to us to torture us. That's more or less what it is. But no, in all seriousness, we started this last year during the shutdown, and it kind of became a fun way to interact with you guys. You guys have lots of trade ideas, and you like to send them through in the YouTube comments and on Twitter, and via email and all that stuff. And instead of trying to respond to everybody and do all that, we just decided to collect some of the best ones we get and throw them into a show and offer grades on the 20/80 baseball scouting scale. 80 being just like the best trade we've ever seen, 20 being just not good. And we have had some 20s before. Most of the grades fall between 40 and 50, just because, again, making trades off the top of your head is incredibly hard, and we're doing it with less information than the people who actually do it for a living. So we try to keep things as neutral as we can when we talk about these trades, and we'll be wrong on some where we'll say that's not very realistic, and then a trade will happen and it'll look pretty darn close to what happened, and we just don't have all the information that GMs do, or even that some of you guys do. We miss some stuff sometimes along the way too. So just a fun little exercise where we hear from you guys and you send us your trades. And we discuss them a little bit. We throw a grade on them, and it's mostly just a pretty kickback, laid back type of show, and we just toss around ideas, or let you guys toss around ideas, and Ty and I bat them around a little and see if we see what we like and what we think needs improving. But last year was kind of a free for all, so we've decided to add a few rules this year. Ty's going to go ahead and he'll tell you the rules, but pay attention to these guys. We're not going to repeat this every Friday. We probably will, but
well, first of all, just want to say, this is to echo Colby. We're just having fun, on this show. This is just a fun, relaxing way to kind of cap off the week here on the show. And we're not saying that we know more than you, all that stuff. We're just looking to have some fun, react to your trades, all that good stuff. So the rules. Because last year we got bombarded with a billion Brian Reynolds and Jose Ramirez trades, we are going to limit the number of trades that we cover over the course of the series this offseason on certain players. So like Shohei Ohtani, Ronald Acuna Jr. We will answer, or we'll react to very few of those trades if we get them. And if they're not, clearly troll trades that people are just making as a gag, right? Mm-hmm. We're a serious podcast here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. No, but we do want to actually give a spotlight to the people that do the research and put effort into the trades and all that stuff. Like we do want to react to your trades if you put the work in. Second of all, speaking of putting the work in, we are not going to be reacting to trades that basically leave it up to some form of interpretation. Like, we got a few trades when we first sent out our tweet asking for them this week on Twitter that were basically like Jared Kelenic and Taylor Trammell and then like a AA prospect. Okay, well, what does that mean? And we don't want to fill in the gaps, mostly because we might get it wrong, right? We might not actually know what you're saying. And so we don't want to mess up what your actual trade proposal was and score it wrong because we misinterpreted what you were saying. So please have a full trade. If you're going to submit a trade, please have a full trade with names. And if you're going to involve cash in the deal as well, we want to hear the exact amount of cash. Like, it doesn't have to be like 5.3 million. Yeah. It doesn't have to be down to the penny, but like, say like $5 million or whatever, if you want to trade Marco Gonzalez, etc. All that. So
even like half the contract or whatever, like you don't know what the contract is, but you want to include cash or whatever, just give us a percentage that you'd want Seattle or the other team to eat. At least give us that to work with.
Yeah. All right. So after that very long-winded explanation of what Fan Fiction Friday is and the rules and guidelines that we have, it's time to get into the trades. We're going to answer as many as we can on here. We strictly went to Twitter, and we're going to make this a thing where we kind of alternate the platforms so we don't get too many submissions. So one week will be Twitter, the next week will be YouTube, the next week after that will be Twitter if it still exists. Yeah, if it still exists, we'll see. But next week will probably
email,
be
baby.
But if you're on YouTube right now and you want to be a part of this, next week I think we're doing YouTube. We also have an email. We might do just email submissions for 1 week. We'll see. All right, let's get into the first trade here from Chowder Headed Yokel on Twitter. Love that name. Pretty sure that's a Twin Peaks reference, so shout out to Twin Peaks. Jesse Winker or Marco Gonzalez and Abraham Toro to the Mets for Luis Guillorme. Colby, what do you think?
Yeah, I like the idea of Guillorme, mostly because that's a guy we haven't heard a lot, we haven't talked a lot about. But I think there's some problems with this deal, most notably the Mets are a team that's already well over the luxury tax threshold. They have players they want to re-sign. Brandon Nimmo is still a guy they need to get done. Taijuan Walker is still floating around out there. They have players that they want to keep, and also it's obviously already very expensive players on their roster. So in this trade, Guillorme, who is ARB1, he's only going to make about $1.5 million this year, give or take. Whereas Winker and Toro are going to be worth around $10 million. That's something that I don't think the Mets are going to want to do. And also, this trade doesn't absolutely make them better. There's still a lot of risk in Jesse Winker and Abraham Toro. After the year he had, it's hard to imagine that there's really any value in his name. So I like the creativity of going outside the box with the second base solution. But there are issues with the player too. He doesn't hit for much power. Just kind of honestly feels pretty much Abraham Toro, Sam Haggerty-ish. So I think I would just rather roll with Winker if I were the Mariners. And I think if I were the Mets, I would just prefer, if I'm going to spend $9 million on my ball club, I'll just go out into free agency and get somebody I feel better about than Jesse Winker. Marco doesn't really fit either because, again, I'll just go sign a number 5 that I like more than Marco. I'd rather just go pay the extra for Taijuan Walker than trade for Marco. So I think it's, I think it's interesting. I think the valuation's just a little too far off. So I probably give it I'll go 45.
Yeah. On the 20/80 scale, 50 is usually really good, but for me, just kind of in this practice, this exercise rather, 50 is kind of the average, right? Because it's right in the middle. So I'll go 50 because I think this is pretty much right in the middle. Mostly for the creativity, because we haven't heard Luis Guillorme's name really at all. So kudos on that. But I agree with everything that Colby said, specifically when it comes to the financial side of things for New York, and when it comes to the concerns over Winker's recent surgeries and all that. So trade number 2 here comes from Anthony Neal. It's another Winker trade. Jesse Winker and Perlander Baroa for Gleyber Torres. Gleyber Torres is only 25 years old, Colby, coming off of a 2.7 F4 season, or 4 B-WAR, depending on which outlet you prefer. He hit 24 home runs, 115 WRC plus. Pretty good, and he's under club control not only for this year but next year, and I believe it was Joel Sherman who today said the Mariners have some interest in Gleyber Torres. So what do you think about this deal?
Yeah, Gleyber Torres is interesting. And it's kind of been, I think we had a few trade offers that involve Glaber. So apparently this is something that of Mariner fans and Yankee fans have been thinking about quite a bit. As far as the trade package itself goes, it feels a little light. I think Jesse Winker's actually a pretty good fit for Yankee Stadium. But again, because Glaber is 25 years old and he's got 2 years of club control, and I don't know what his ARB number is. I guess I could look that up while you talk, but it feels light. It feels a little light to me.
Yeah.
Sherman speculated that the Mariners have the type of relievers the Yankees are looking to add. Obviously, that happened today after you sent this question, but I think a reliever swap for Glaber makes a little more sense. I do think Torres is a good fit. I think he is a fit for Seattle, and I do understand why the Yankees might want to move him. They just signed Kiner Falefa today, also
Yep.
to your deal, so that's kind of a shortstop slash second baseman slash third baseman slash catcher. So yeah, I feel like it's definitely possible that they'll move Glaber Torres. So this one's pretty good. I think it's a little off in terms of valuation. So I'm going to give it a 45 though.
Yeah, again, for the concerns over Winker's recent surgeries and just overall struggles, the fact that he's going to cost $8 million and is only, a 1-year guy. I don't know if Baroa closes the gap enough because of those concerns. But maybe I'm just overvaluing Gleyber Torres. I don't know. Maybe I'm overvaluing his value to the Yankees. I really don't know. But Baroa is a guy that probably ends up in the bullpen eventually. Some really loud stuff, but just can't really find the strike zone mostly. He's one of those guys. He's also going to take a 40-man spot, and that's a little bit more valuable to the Yankees right now than to the Mariners. So I don't know if this one works. But yeah, maybe someone like Matt Festa or Paul Sewald or someone like that works here in a deal with the Yankees. Right. I'll give this deal 45.
Glaber, by the way, estimated to make $9.8 million this year.
Okay.
So no salary savings in the Winker swap either for the Yankees.
Yeah.
So
the financial aspect of this means less than it does to the Mets.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I am not really accounting for that, but I just think player for player value wise, I don't know if it necessarily lines up. So what are you giving this one again?
45, I think.
Cool. All right, so we got more trades coming up. But just in a moment, real quick, a reminder, this episode of Locked On Mariners is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from football to basketball to soccer and esports. We've got it all at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. You're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. It's Fan Fiction Friday here. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Let's get into trade number 3 here. This one comes from Tyler Cartwright. Chris Flexen, Penn Murphy, and Tom Murphy to the Red Sox for Kike Hernandez, who just recently signed an extension. Now, Colby, you know how much I love Kike Hernandez, but how do you feel about Kike Hernandez?
He's fine. I mean, that's literally how I feel about it. He's fine. But I think if you're the Mariners, you're losing more with this trade than you're getting back. Kike certainly, play the outfield, can play some second base. He's a solid player. But we look at what the Mariners are losing here. They're losing a kind of a solid middle reliever. They're also losing a really valuable backup catcher who, traditionally crushes left-handed pitching, which makes him a pretty good fit with Cal Raleigh. So I think also Murphy, by the way, Tom, I should clarify.
Yep.
Tom Murphy is viewed as like a big voice in that clubhouse. He's a big locker room guy. I mean, he's not a team captain. The Mariners don't have those, but he does carry that kind of veteran presence. And you're probably going to lose Mitch Haniger this winter. you want guys like Tom Murphy in your clubhouse. So I think Murphy's value extends even a little more beyond what he brings to the field. So yeah, to me, this is no. I don't think the Mariners get good enough. I don't think the Mariners. I don't think the Mariners get better enough to sacrifice Tom Murphy in this particular deal. I like Kike. He's a solid player, and the Mariners aren't giving away a ton here, but they are giving away, very valuable pieces for their current roster build. So for me, this one's a no.
Yeah, I think it creates more problems than it solves. And, again, I really like Kike Hernandez. I think you're overvaluing Kike Hernandez in this deal, personally, because he's coming off of a not a great year. He was injured for most of it. Then he slashed 222, 291, 338 with a 75 WRC plus. The year before that, he had a really good postseason, but he also in the regular season slashed 250, 337, 449 with a 109 WRC plus. He was a 3.9 F4 player, which is good. Don't get me wrong. And he was valuable defensively. Can play second base, can play in center field, can play any outfield spot. But and before that, the 2 years before that with LA, he was a 86 WRC plus guy and an 81 WRC plus guy. So for 1 year of a low end number 4, high end number 5 starter in Chris Flexen, for multiple years of a pretty good reliever that seems to be on the rise in Penn Murphy, middle inning type of reliever. And then for one of your clubhouse leaders in Tom Murphy, who would suddenly open up a backup catching spot on your roster, and now you have to solve that issue. Maybe that's just Cooper Hummel or Luis Torrens or whoever, but also Murphy is a nice piece to have, because if Murphy plays the way that he did to start this year and plays the way that he did a couple of years ago, I mean, you probably have the best catching position in all of baseball between Raleigh and Murphy. So I'm going to give this one, and also, Kike is making a little bit of money. I'm sure that would, even out. I don't know. I don't have the specific numbers here, but I'm sure that would even out a little bit with Murphy's money and Flexen's money. But overall, this seems like a lot for a guy that's not particularly a great hitter, or hasn't been for the most part, and basically gives you the same versatility defensively, maybe a little bit better than Dylan Moore and Sam Haggerty.
Yeah, I just think you can go buy Kike Hernandez, go buy his bat, on the market, or maybe they're even find a better outfielder to trade for less. So for me, I'm going to give this one. I'll also give it a 45 though, because again, Kike is pretty. It's not a name we've heard a lot, and also this might be the first trade I've seen all winter that includes Tom Murphy. So yeah. I think that's pretty interesting.
Actually, I don't think I gave it a score. 35 for me, actually, because I think it's a lot. I think it's a lot from the Mariners side.
Ty is such a player hater. Anyways,
yeah, clearly, yeah, I'm a player slammer. I'm a clickbaiter, all that stuff. notorious. Peter has a deal. This one's really interesting because this is prospects on prospects on prospects. Emerson Hancock and Prolanda Baroa to St. Louis for Mason Wynn. Former two-way player, now he's just hitting. He's not pitching anymore. They just want him to hit. A lot of speed here, good defense, all that stuff. Not a lot of power, but good contact skills. What do you think about Mason Wynn and dealing Emerson Hancock and Prolanda Baroa for him?
I would pass. To be honest with you, I feel like I like Mason Wynn. I think he's a pretty fun prospect. Yep. I also feel like, St. Louis probably doesn't pull the trigger on this trade anyways. But if I'm the Mariners, I would much rather continue to develop my arms. It's my strength. It's what I'm good at. Baroa is already on the 40-man too. So that's, going to be an issue with St. Louis. Not a huge one, but it is something that they'll have to counteract. Baroa is probably a guy who can help the Mariners this next year out of the bullpen and still has a chance to start. And Hancock, I feel like you're selling a little low on him if you trade him right now. Personally, I don't think Hancock is like what I thought Hancock could be coming out of Georgia. I no longer think that, but I still think he's got a really good shot to be a number 4 or a number 3 starter. I think that selling him now would be selling low. And as much as I like Mason Wynn, which is quite a bit, I just feel like the Mariners are better off, sticking to their strengths and developing the starting pitching that they have. Wynn isn't close enough to the big leagues or good enough of a prospect for me to give up 2 arms that conceivably could help me in 2023.
Agreed. Wynn just doesn't do enough for me. I like him as a prospect. He's a really fun prospect, but I also really like Emerson Hancock more than Colby does, admittedly. But I do like Emerson Hancock a lot. I like Perlander Barilla.
He's still like number 6 or 7 for me in my prospect rank. So it's not that I hate Emerson Hancock. It's
No, actually, he hates Emerson Hancock, just like, I obviously hate Kyle Lewis. If you were up on Twitter today, you know all about that. But yeah, I'm not,
50
I'm
grade.
not going,
50 grade.
I'm not going down that rabbit hole. Yeah, I like the creativity of this deal.
Yep.
I'll give it a 50 as well.
It's a fun one too.
Yeah. All right. Next up, we've got Josh Games. He says, I'm new to this sort of thing, and this is probably awful, so don't roast me too much. But
too late.
Taylor Trammell and Diego Castillo to the Marlins for Joey Wendell and Jake Eater. This one's really
20
interesting.
Grade. 20 grade.
Yeah. Trash. Josh, never
Garbage.
submit a trade ever. Now our listeners have to burn their eyes after watching that. Okay, so seriously though, this is a pretty interesting deal. What do you think about it? You're a Joey Wendell. You're as close to being a Joey Wendell stan as you can be. So, what do you think about this?
By stan, you mean? Oh yeah, I like that guy as my utility man.
Yeah, exactly.
That's standing a guy, I guess. So here's the deal. I think honestly, Trammell and Castillo for Wendell it probably gets it done. Wendell's only got a year left. He's a little bit pricey. He's not a great fit, but he can play second. He can play third. Makes a ton of contact. Not a ton of power. He's just a good, solid player. So I still do like Joey Wendell. I would prefer him to be the utility guy, but if he's your starting second baseman, that's probably okay as long as you add another impact bat in the outfield.
Yep.
I don't see. Was Eder or Eater? Eder, right?
Yeah,
Eater?
either or. Either
well,
or.
Whatever. Either or. But
either or. Yeah,
I don't see the Marlins trading him, to be quite honest with you. He's 6'4", 215, lefty, upper 90s fastball, wipeout slider, pretty good changeup, throws lots of strikes. He's a legit potential middle of the rotation guy. And the Marlins aren't close enough in that NL East to trade, a guy who could start for them in a few years. Not for Taylor Trammell, who doesn't really provide much right now, at least at the major league level, and Diego Castillo. I think where this might get interesting is if you proposed a Kelnick for Eater swap straight up. We know the Marlins are desperately looking for center fielders. I don't know how they feel about Kelnick. Maybe they feel like Trammell and Kelnick are similar, and maybe that's how this deal gets done. But I think Castillo for Wendell is pretty close. I think they'd probably want a prospect or two instead, but it certainly is interesting. Again, more unique names that we haven't really talked about much. I like Eater quite a bit, which is unfortunately why I don't think this trade happens. I know the Marlins have a ton of starting pitching, but that doesn't mean you just give it away. Yeah. So
I think Eater is overkill in the still. But I'll still give it a 50 for the creativity of it. Maybe a 48, but so like a low end 50, but yeah, whatever. I like it overall. I think Trammell and Castillo is pretty good comp for 1 year of Joey Wendell because he was a pretty good player this past season. So it's going to cost you something. It's going to cost you something. Castillo's an interesting flyer for Miami to take and maybe trade at the deadline or whatever. And he's not so crucial to the Mariners bullpen that it's like, oh my God, we traded Diego Castillo. And Trammell right now at this point just does not have a path to the major league roster in Seattle, considering the things that they want to get done. Obviously, Mitch Haniger is a free agent, but they've added Teoscar Hernandez. They've said that they want to add another outfielder. So, yeah, I just don't see how Trammell kind of factors into the major league plans for the Mariners. What's your grade on this again?
I'll give it a 50. I think it's pretty close to being a realistic trade. I think if you had swapped Kelnick for Trammell, I think it's a solid 50. Right now, I'm like 45 to 50, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, I feel like even with Kelnick, it might be a 55. Like that might actually be like pretty good.
I think you probably have to add a little more, but yeah, I think it's possible. Maybe if you had done something like Sixto Sanchez instead of Eater, that would make even more sense. So it's definitely a good thought, though. I like it.
All right, so we got a few more trades coming up here. But first, a reminder, this episode of Locked On Mariners is brought to you by Simply Safe. If you thought about securing your home with home security but have been putting it off, you want to listen up. Right now, Locked On Mariners listeners can order the #1 rated Simply Safe home security system for 50% off. This is their biggest offer of the year, and you won't want to miss it. Here's why I love it. In an emergency, 24/7 professional monitoring agents use Fast Protect technology exclusively from Simply Safe to capture critical evidence and verify the threat is real so you can get priority police response. Simply Safe is whole home security with advanced sensors for every room, window, and door. HD security cameras for inside and out, smarter ways to detect motion that alert you only when a threat is real, and even hazard sensors that detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. 24/7 professional monitoring service costs less than $1 per day. That's less than half the price of ADT's traditional professionally installed system. With the top-rated Simply Safe app, stay in complete control of your system anytime, anywhere, arm or disarm, unlock for a guest, access your cameras, or adjust system settings. Don't miss your chance to save big on the only security system I recommend. Get 50% off any new Simply Safe system at simplysafe.com/lockedonmlb. This is their biggest discount of the year, so don't wait. That's simplysafe.com/lockedonmlb. There's no safe like Simply Safe. So let's get into trade number 6. Colby, this one comes from our good buddy, Chris. He says, I saw this on Ben Clemens' Fangraphs chat today. I don't know which day it was. Oh, there it is. This was on November 16th. He said he'd do it for both teams. White Sox get Marco and Winker. Mariners get Lurie Garcia, Kendall Graveman, and a lotto ticket prospect. All right, so yeah, we're kind of breaking our rule here because this does leave a little up to interpretation, but this was a deal that was proposed by someone else in another chat, and Ben Clemens, who's legit on Fangraphs, said he would do it, so I do want to acknowledge this one. Garcia, to me, is just, like, he's useless. Like, he's worth $5 million. He was a 39 WRC plus guy this year. You have, Sam Haggerty and Dylan Moore and those guys on your roster right now. I don't really see a use for Lurie Garcia, but, I mean, if it levels out the money, then fine. Kendall Graveman, though, that'd be a fun ad, and I like Graveman. I know the clubhouse really likes Graveman, so that would be a cool reunion. He's making, I think, $8 million over the next 2 years, or $8 million each over the next 2 years. Marco's making 6.5 and then 12, I think, and then a club option. And Winker's got the $8 million this year, so it more or less lines up. So what do you think about this?
Depends on the prospect. There would be something kind of funny about reacquiring Kendall Graveman after a certain somebody tried to roast the GM for trading him in the first place. So that'd be pretty funny. Also, it would be hilarious to see the White Sox try to solve their outfield defense problem by going and getting another guy who should probably only play first base to play left field for them. That's kind of on brand. So I think it's interesting. I certainly wouldn't object to it as a Mariners fan. Graveman is valuable. He's helpful. So to me, I think I would probably do this deal. I'd like a decent prospect back, though, because like you said, I'm basically taking Lurie Garcia off of your hands for you. You have to pay me to do that because I have Lurie Garcia at home, right? Like a couple of guys who could be Lurie Garcia. So I think it's interesting. Yeah, honestly, they're better, right?
Significantly, I would even say at this
point. Right. So yeah, I think I would probably do this trade. I think it's interesting. I think it's hysterical that Graveman would come back and the White Sox would take on another corner outfielder who really should not be playing in the outfield to try and fix their athleticism problem. So I think that's a pretty interesting trade. I'd probably give it like a 55.
Yeah, so this was technically not Chris's trade. This is whoever it was in the Fangraphs
cheated
chat.
Chris.
Yeah, so Chris, you get a full grade bump down, 40.
Fair enough.
But it would be a 50 otherwise.
Okay.
But Chris, because you cheated, no. All right, trade number 7 comes from Aiden. Aiden, who was notorious last offseason for coming through with these incredibly minor deals, and he's right on brand again with this one.
Yes.
Nationals receive Mariners prospect Spencer Packard, and the Mariners receive right-handed reliever, Yarlene Susana. So, Colby, what do you think about Susana?
He's way too good to be traded for Spencer Packard. Susana's 100 plus fastball, really good slider. Again, he's a young guy. He's not going to be around until like 2025, 2026. He's going to walk guys. It's a power arm right now. Is basically what it is. But I think the Nationals believe that he has a chance to start. They think he's going to throw plenty of strikes. So, like, would you trade young Andres Munoz for, essentially a guy who probably caps out as a 4A outfielder? No, you wouldn't. So, Aiden, I like that you're back, and I like that Ty kind of picked like two legacy Fan Fiction Friday veterans who each have their own little shtick that they like to stick with. But this is not one of your better efforts, buddy. Spencer Packard is just not worth that quality of prospect. So, unfortunately, I'm disappointed that I have to give you a 30. Damn. Spencer Packard is just a dude.
Yeah. I mean, like, he had a pretty good year, but yeah, he still seems like he still seems like he's just a guy. Susana, still 18 years old. Like I said, he's probably going to be a reliever at the end of this because like he's really struggling with command, but he's also 18 years old, so he's got a lot of time to develop. I don't see it. Like Colby said, big fastball, potentially a really good slider as well. I don't see them trading that for Spencer Packard. Plus, they don't really need, the Nationals specifically don't really need someone that's closer to the big leagues. They can wait it out on Susana.
I mean, plus, by the way, Packard's just turned 25 years old. He's only played in high A ball, hasn't even gotten a double as a 25-year-old. And he was old even for the Arizona Fall League that he played in this year. He's almost 2 years older than the average player in the Arizona Fall League. So all of his numbers that he's putting up have to come with a huge asterisk. So no. No, not going to happen.
So I'm going to go 30 as well on this. I'm sorry, Aiden, but you gotta go back to the drawing board on that one. All right. Last trade of the day comes from another legacy Fan Fiction Friday trade. I don't know, submitter, I guess. Daisy and the Dingo. Mariners get Tommy Edman. Blue Jays get Chris Flex. This is a 3-team deal, folks, and Daisy and the Dingo is very notorious.
Yes.
Daisy and the Dingo is very notorious for their 3-team trades. So Tommy Edman to the Mariners from the Cardinals. Blue Jays get Chris Flexen and Matt Brash, and the Cardinals get Danny Jansen. Now, Tommy Edman was like top 5 in National League WAR for a while. I don't know if he still is. He was like one of the best defenders in all of baseball this year.
Yep.
And that was really, really, what was driving that high WAR. But what do you think about this deal? Because, I mean, Jansen's a really nice piece for the Cardinals. The Mariners are giving up a really nice piece in Brash, especially if, maybe the Blue Jays value him as a starter. I think this deal was also submitted before the Teoscar deal. The Blue Jays still need pitching. I still think that Chris Flexen makes sense for the Toronto Blue Jays. So I think all of this, makes sense. I can see where Daisy and the Dingo's head was at. But this is, 3-team trades are especially really complicated, and this is a pretty big deal. So I don't know. I feel like I can't give this more than a 50. It also kind of feels like it might be like a 35 or a 40. So I don't know. Let me sit on this one. Let me hear what you say before I decide on my score.
Yeah, I wonder if the Cardinals would trade, because essentially what this is would the Cardinals trade Edman for Danny Jansen straight up? I kind of doubt it. I think the Cardinals believe that they could go ahead and just sign, Wilson Contreras or Omar Narvaez. I think they could find a little bit better of a player for Tommy Edman. Edman's interesting. He's got 3 years of club control left. He's coming off a 5-win season. It's almost certainly going to be his career year. The bat honestly is quite similar to Colton Wong, who we talked about yesterday.
Yep.
And honestly, I'd probably bet on Wong's bat over Edman. So how super valuable is second base defense? I mean, for the Mariners, this comes down to run prevention. Essentially, Edman a 108 WRC plus, which is good, but certainly not elite. But are you going to give up more runs from trading Matt Brash than you save from going from Edman to Glaber or Wong or Xander or whoever they bring in to play second base? So I get the thought process. The Cardinals certainly need a catcher. The Blue Jays certainly need pitching, and the Mariners need a second baseman. So it all makes sense in that way. I just think the valuation's a bit off here. I think the Cardinals are the stumbling block here. I think the Blue Jays would trade Danny Jansen for Flexen and Brash in a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that the Mariners. I don't think they would take Edman for Brash. I'm not saying they wouldn't. I think it's possible, but I think this thing falls apart at the Cardinals because they're giving up their all-star second baseman. I think a guy who got MVP votes this year. And they're giving him up for a good but not great catcher, straight up. It feels light on the Cardinals side, so I'd probably go ahead and give this one like a because you have to qualify it as it's a 3-team deal, so difficulty goes up a little bit. I'd still give it a 50 because it's creative and it's difficult, a difficult trade to come up with. So I think it's pretty solid, but I think it falls apart at the Cardinals.
Yeah, 50 is the most I'm willing to give it. I kind of feel 45 on this though, because the Cardinals are a big hang up. I feel like the Mariners, actually maybe the Blue Jays need to chip in a little something extra here over to St. Louis along with Jansen. I don't know. It's complicated. These 3-team deals are really complicated. I don't know how actual general managers and execs hammer these things out because they're just ridiculous. They're incredibly chaotic and hard to sift through. But yeah, I it's really creative. Edman's a really good player. Not a great hitter, obviously, like you said. 108 WRC plus, doesn't hit for a ton of power. Only 13 home runs this season. Last 2 years, he was a 90 WRC plus guy. So, this was kind of an outlier year for him a little bit. His best season offensively was his rookie season back in 2019. And that year, he was a 3.8 F4 guy in 92 games. There's some risk involved there because what if the bat regresses, right? Like you have a really good defender at second base, but that only takes you so far, right? You need some offensive production from that spot. So yeah, I just don't know if the cost justifies Tommy Edman for the Mariners because, like you said, it's a run prevention thing, and yeah, I'm sure the Mariners would really like Tommy Edman because he's big on run prevention, but so is Matt Brash. And maybe now that Eric Swanson's out of town, maybe the Mariners see some value in Chris Flexen sticking around too. Maybe they see Flexen coming out of the bullpen and maybe getting him to throw that slider a bit more. Who knows? All right, so that's gonna do it for Fan Fiction Friday, our first Fan Fiction Friday of the off season. We're gonna be doing more of these, like I said. And we're probably going to be kicking it to you guys on YouTube. We'll make a post on YouTube, on our YouTube page, for you guys to submit them there, and we'll pick our favorites out of there and react to those on next Friday's show. Obviously, if there's some big news item that happens on a Friday that we need to get to, Fan Fiction Friday will probably get pushed back or whatever. We'll still get to it, but it might not actually happen on that Friday. But that's a very specific situation. Anyway, that's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. For Colby Patnode, I'm Ty Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter, if it still exists by the time you're watching this, at @LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Dane Gonzalez, that's DaneGNZLZ, and Colby at CPAT11, that's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. And thank you again for making us your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast featuring the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts, just like us. And with that, have yourself a beautiful baseball day and a beautiful baseball weekend, and we'll see you next week. Peace.